opportunity to be in dialogue today with Northwestern, which I think was such an important space for me to develop intellectually and also as a person. I selected Professor Patillo, AKA Mary. I know I have the green light to now use your first name, but I don't, because I'm old school and I feel like until I get through the process, everyone's a professor. So, and I didn't say this, but I selected you because you're the only professor that gave me a B+ in the department in that. So my philosophy is always go back and reconnect with the people that were tough with you, you know? And I think that that's, for me, it's been an important lesson as a descendant of the Caribbean who has come from a long line of tough women. So kudos to you, Mary. I am, you know, just really grateful to connect, and I hope that this talk can serve a purpose and a space for you know, students at Northwestern now and also in the future, and anyone who's just seeking resources for how to navigate traveling abroad. So I really commend you all for starting this initiative, because it's a conversation that, quite frankly, didn't exist. When I was in my, you know, just early years of kind of traveling alone and also in the company of, and you know, of educational departments, and also traveling in the company of friends and family. And so this has been a wonderful opportunity to reflect, look at past photographs, and being home in New York and just going through my parents' home and digging through has been a really enjoyable experience. So I'm going to start off with sharing some slides for today. And the title of my presentation is When I Get Home, Searching for Safety in an Imbalanced World. And I share that because I think that the quest for finding something that feels like home can be a process. And I am more and more making peace with the fact that it's never an endpoint or a final destination. And as someone that lives between I guess, two hyphenated nationalities, with, you know, having a US passport, and also being very aware of my parents' lack of a US passport, and their decision to stay Haitian citizens has made me really cognizant and conscious of the ways in which I move around the world. And so I think that there have been moments where I felt at home and at peace, and moments where I felt really afraid of the world. And I think that that's something that we can all connect to, you know, within the past couple of years. Or if we want to look at the longer histories of the African-American experience in the United States, it can date back even longer. I think I became first aware that my parents had a different passport than me when we were traveling through the Dominican Republic. And I'll circle back to that story, but for now, I will begin with Ayanna at the age of 12. But I just wanted to share some quick goals for my presentation today. I just want to offer an intellectual biography of my life and my studies. I want to just visually and sonically explore the places that I've traveled to for research and work. I just realized that is there a gray line going across the screen, or does that not show up on other people's screen? Mary?
I see everything fine.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay. So I want to offer an intellectual biography of my life and my studies. I want to visually and sonically explore the places I've traveled to for research, pleasure, and work. I want to discuss how the field of African-American studies shaped my outlook and questions about the world, and also just at the end, some tips for traveling and safety and history and exploring work-life balance abroad. So at the age of 12, my mother found out that one of her friends was going to Greece. And at that moment in time, I was obsessed with Greece. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I memorized every name of the Greek and Roman gods. I love the fables and the ways in which the history of this time was told. I did everything from making creative pieces like, little works of art that represented a coin from that period of time. And I had to really just, I just wanted to revel in that period in time. And I have to say that this is a result of my schooling and the ways in which young people are introduced to history. I know in my case, you're taught about the great ancient civilizations, and the one that we spent the most amount of time on was Greece. And I had the opportunity to dig and find some old packets I had no idea were in my old childhood bedroom, things that I had transported with me, and also a diary entry dated March 15, 2003. I said, "Dear diary, I'm 11 years old and I'm in Athens now." I just got off the bus and I'm on the plane. And I kind of chronicle just the things I was observing at that age. Everything from someone being like inebriated on the plane to plants that I observed and thought were cool. And to my surprise, I was also very aware of my Blackness and just the activity of being at various tourist sites and wanting to, connect with people that were obviously different than me, and were probably not accustomed to seeing someone my age just like running around. But my games of trying to count the number of Black people in the room started way younger than I realized. But I also love these photos because they remind me of the fact that despite my mother's own limitations with travel, and obviously as I've gotten older, I learned about her process of getting a visa and all those things. She really encouraged me to fly and explore places that were very different from my home in Harlem and in New York. And so I think there was a kind of boldness of my parents to kind of push me out into the world at such a young age. And also these photos provided me a lot of context for understanding why I was getting a Ph.D. in Duke. And as every graduate student knows, as you go through any kind of process, you have moments where there's a loss of meaning. And you question a lot why you're doing your work or what the goal is. And these photographs really centered me and made me realize that I had these questions about the world at a young age, and also that I was really interested in signs, things that, demonstrated to me that we live in a Anglo-centric world. If I could walk around and still see that there was a sign both in English and in Greek for me to read, and realizing that certain languages in the world are just more marginalized than others. And that is just the world that we live in. And I think that as I reflect more about this period in time and why so much of my grade school was cemented in the classics. And this is actually something I pulled from Columbia University's website, because I remember that there had been a debate for some time about the curriculum of a classic education and the kind of silencing of Africa and just the focus on Europe as the hub of ingenuity, civilization, all of these things. And I had to think about just what is the history of just valuing like Greek art, Greek sculpture. If you go into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, yes, there are art institutions are absolutely responding to the times, but you still also see what is the most prized and valued works. And so this was very interesting for me because it gave me some kind of context to think about the place that my parents are from, which is not as valued and not seen as the birthplace of intellectual formation in the same ways that Greek culture and society were respected. This is a map of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Jamaica and Puerto Rico from the Cold War, which is a period I'm working on. So I wanted to check it out selfishly. But, the map reminds me of just how tied the Caribbean is, and that kind of having that clarity and orientation around the Caribbean as a site that I really needed to unpack and spend more time is really propelled a lot of my intellectual inquiries in the future, especially in college. And the moment that, really shocked the world was obviously the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. And another brief shock was this photograph that includes what is taking place in Texas and the various Haitian migrants that are attempting to go to Mexico and find peace and safety in the midst of these times. And so I don't love to look at images from 2010. They're still challenging for me and they're still very uncomfortable, but it was such a defining moment for me in terms of thinking about what I wanted to challenge in the world. And at that time, I remember that I wanted to do a dorm drive and get medicine, supplies, clothes, and items that Haitians needed after the catastrophe. And I remember someone in the dorm coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I heard you're collecting items for Haiti. Do you think you could use a used toothbrush?" And the moment was like, whoa, for me. And this is not anything to say about that dorm or the student body. But it's more reflective of how normalized it is in the public domain to dehumanize Haiti and to just see it as a subhuman place. And I think that for my travels, it's been really important for me to think about the glory and the magnificence that I was able to experience as a tourist in Greece, and the lack of that same kind of feeling for other spaces in the world. And so I signed up for Sherwin Bryant's Black Politics in Latin America because I was like, this all sucks. Like, everything that's going on right now sucks. And what I know is that I don't want to be a foreign diplomat, because if this is what foreign diplomats do after a catastrophe, I don't want any part of it. If this is what like the nonprofit sector is about, I don't want any part of it. I know that there's a Haiti that is warm and fun, that hasn't been highlighted and deserves to, have another narrative be told about it. And the person that continues to inspire me is Michel Rolfe-Trouillot, who is an anthropologist and a historian, who wrote a book, Silencing the Past, about how history gets produced, and he used Haiti as his template. And I think these two pictures are my other template for reminding myself to experience Haiti through joy and fun. That is me eating a mango in a car, and that is my father enjoying a coconut on the beach. And that is the singer Martha Jean-Claude, who, oh, did I make a mistake? And I did. Okay. This is the moment where I share the link. I sent everyone a link to just listen to a song and I also wanted to share that these kind of joyful sounds that I heard in my home from my Haitian parents just weren't very representative of the kind of visual feedback I was getting about Haiti. So I'm gonna just pause and maybe allow everyone, 30 seconds to just listen to actually I'll set the timer for like 60 seconds and just allow everyone to play the song. Okay, I hope that gave everyone enough time to jam. So that's just like one example for me of just recognizing that Haiti emulated and embodied so many things, from music to collaborations between Haitian singers and a Cuban singer, which in this case is Celia Cruz and Martha Jean-Claude. Haiti is a society with fruit, with intellectuals. And this sounds like a very basic thing, but it really became a radical orientation for redefining a space for myself that did not reflect what was marketed or shown to me in media. And another example for me of just like making peace and finding ways to tell a different narrative of Haiti is through looking at family photographs. On the top left, that's my deceased grandmother. That's my grandmother who is still alive and 98. That's my grandfather who's deceased. And then that's a family photograph from my mom's side of the family. My grandmother had, oh my God, 11 kids? Yes, 11 kids. Yes. With 10 surviving. But I think that there is a kind of beauty in this photo and that it's like representative of a middle-class family in Haiti. And these are just not the type of images that we're shown. And so photography has become another tool for me in my work and also in my personal life to kind of trouble the images that are fed to me about that space. And so another work that has also allowed me to think about history in Haiti, a place that, as I have shared, comparatively doesn't have the major monuments and clear narrative of the ancient past in the way that Greece does. Oh, excuse me. And yet I really have come to respect poets and writers for the ways in which they can find creative outlets to explore history on their own terms. And the poem that was introduced to me is a Derek Walcott poem called The Sea is History. And this is probably one of my favorite moments in Haiti, was just randomly getting into this fisherman's boat and just seeing the ways in which he navigated the waters. And honestly, was very in tune with nature, meaning that when the sun was setting down, that's the conclusion of the day, and also when the sun was going out, that's an opportunity to really start the day on a fresh, new note. And I just think that the opportunity to be in the sea really made me think about the history of Haiti through its water. I mean, most famously, a statue of Christopher Columbus was thrown into the water following the fall of Jean-Claude Duvalier, who was in power along with his father for years. And to think about Haitians throwing a statue of Christopher Columbus into the ocean and not having any concern about this ancient relic of the past, I think is really emblematic of the ways in which in the Caribbean people think about and write about history in ways that, as I keep expressing, are not necessarily represented in museums or these fancy spaces like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or with just a tourist package advertising Greece. This is also this moment actually surprised me, because I was walking around in a neighborhood with a cousin of my father, and he brings us into this Voodoo Temple, and I just had no idea what kind of art was in that space, and the ways in which people have utilized elements of Catholicism to reorient and reconstruct meaning within their respective society is quite powerful, in the sense that you are never really, I think within Haitian society there's just so many layers, and you can clearly see the impact of Christianity within this temple, but you can also see that there are very African elements to it, just simply in the way that the man on the left has his hair styled in locks, which is continues to be stigmatized at times in Haitian society. My father was given a cup with water. Now that I'm poking, he might have a bottle of rum in his other hand, but just this practice of doing libations. I mean, there's just such a different experience of traveling through a space that I thought I knew, or a space that was explained in a certain way in a book, and just having the opportunity to explore and be in another space was very impactful for me. I just have some photos of my time in Colombia. The person on the top, it was my friend Caterina, and we just bonded immediately. And the opportunity to walk around Cali, Colombia, and be just I don't know, just chatting about the same things that I would talk to my friends in New York. I mean, we would talk about Twitter and Instagram and beauty. And as you can see, we in this picture of where we had all gone to a festival together, I mean, just the act of even wrapping our hairs was just so everyday and natural. I think actually this photo made it into some like local magazine. And that's how I pulled it up. And we joked about like our, 5 minutes of fame in Cali, but that was the Petronio Festival that sought to highlight Afro cuisine and just the cultures of the sea. And so, there was everything from, shrimp and fish made a particular way, a rum drink made a particular way, and just having these opportunities to make these ties between Haiti and Colombia were a really important moment for me. And also my experiences abroad, going there as an adult. The one photo is from my time in Milan, Italy. I was working for the Black Portraitures Conference under the leadership of Dr. Deborah Willis. And also I found, my old bus pass for my time in Madrid. And just once again, I think looking back at this Metro card reminded me of access and how much fluidity of resources came to me just from, my American status, even in Spain. But also at the same time, I have had those painful experiences in Europe of, and I did want to like share a trigger warning with people, but just knowing that you walk in this Black woman's body and the ways in which people make assumptions about access and touch, and it can, I have had these like challenging and complicated experiences, even in Turkey, of like being groped, and I was there and I was like, this is a space that is defined as safe, and yet I feel so like unsafe right now. And I had to be aware also that there was this kind of fetish around Black American women's bodies. Maybe this is from media or television, whatever people consume. But once again, it was just walking in this awareness of, I'm in this space and it's different. People don't look necessarily like me, but I know that I have a right to be here. And yet I have to kind of be cognizant and think about all of my subjectivities in this different way. And then I'm going to also just briefly talk about my time in Cuba, which was a trip that was incredible. And one thing that I will tell anyone who is going abroad to Latin America, you must find a Black Madonna, and just find the various ways in which people express their beliefs, their spiritual thoughts. And I think that seeing the various depictions of Black Madonnas throughout Latin America, and unfortunately I don't have some of my pictures from Bolivia, but that has also, been really important in terms of thinking and seeing how Black women's bodies also get represented, even through, topics such as Christianity. I will say that in this quest to understanding Blackness, I did make some bold choices. When I was in Bolivia, I was inspired to go to a very, very, I guess very much not a tourist site, a place called Las Yungas. And as you can see, the roads are not great. And I encountered Black and Indigenous women who were wearing these hats and dressing in ways that were very traditional, but I don't think that even in some of the courses or the ways in which people are still teaching about the histories of Latin America, that the ties between Blackness and indigeneity get tied all the time. But for me, this was like a living example of that. And so that was just an important memory. And I, would always encourage students to find that place that no one is really thinking about, because that ended up being one of the most important trips for me while I was in Bolivia, more than, any kind of traditional museum or space that people are encouraged. So I'm going to pause there and just like leave this as a time to explore and Mary.
Yes, yes. Wonderful. So I'll be the one off my, have my mic unmuted to clap. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. That diary entry was just lovely. And thank you for sharing yourself, your family, your experiences, your insight, your wisdom. It really was. I totally enjoyed all the photographs and all the introspection. So just in case other folks have a couple questions, I have just a few. I'll start with this point that you made about having a U.S. passport. So incredibly important. So you juxtaposed it with your mother. I would like to hear you talk about your experiences in other countries with other Black people when your Americanness was salient. Do you have any thoughts about that, reflections?
Absolutely. And thank you for posing that question. Yeah, I can definitely think about my time in Spain, where it was permissible to be Black and American, but definitely not permissible to be African. And it was very clear just in walking through nightclubs, being with guy friends and seeing the backs and forths that they would be having with security over their dress, over their hair, over their hat. That was very frustrating to watch. And I don't think that there was honestly anyone on staff prepared to coach people through those kinds of encounters. And I think that was unfortunate.
Then on the flip side, are there times when you remember thinking, oh, thank goodness I'm an American. I might be Black, but thank goodness I'm an American.
Oh, yes. Anytime I look at the line in the airport and I have to do the comparison. And
the return line, you mean?
Yeah, the return line. When I was in the Dominican Republic with my parents, I mean, I've gone there many times, but this was a different trip because this time we flew into the DR. Definitely made me very upset. I hated being separated from my parents. I hated seeing that I hated seeing the bribing that had to go down. I hated the random confiscation of items that seemed really superfluous. And anytime my parents have to, I mean, yeah, I had a moment where, you know, my brother and I got a call and our parents were not where we thought they were going to be. And just recognizing the anti-Haitian sentiment that really has been blossoming in Latin America in the past, I mean, honestly, since 2010, but, you know, we're seeing little sparks of it in moments. Yeah, that was a really painful moment to be like, hey, my parents are where are they? And I don't know where they are. And all I know is that this means that they're not where they need to be. And I think that is, yeah, I think that's what made starting some of my research really tough when I first got to Duke, because when I went into the archive and saw the photographs and images of Haitians in Guantanamo Bay and Fort Allen, Puerto Rico, and I was like, what? Like, no. And I couldn't start my work there because it felt heavy. And it was the embodiment of racialized hatred and the continued stigma that we have against people seeking safety, and these kind of seemingly watery terms of like refugees and asylum and just the inconsistency of all of that. Yeah, and I think also being in graduate school and having to see sometimes what I have an Afro-Colombian friend. I mean, I have to sometimes have these moments where I break down like how things go down in the US with Black Americans, you know, for her to comprehend what it means to be walking around in this country. And I think one of the most challenging moments was getting a phone call from her after the George Floyd verdict. I mean, I had no idea how much that experience was impacting her. I mean, I don't think, I for one was just trying to make sure I was like getting up and showering during that time, right? Like it was such a messy, complex time, but to hear her reaction as an Afro-Colombian woman living in the United States was really heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before I ask my next question, I will open it up to see if there's anybody who wants to get in the queue before I just continue to talk to Ayanna. I think maybe you could just unmute yourself or write something in the chat, raise your hand, any of those functions.
I mean, I'm going to ask you a question, Mary. Like, what are some, I kind of want to pose those same questions back to you. Also, like,
well, the questions come of my own experience, similarly, walking in hotels unmolested, trying to walk in with, in my case, Colombian as well, Afro-Colombian friends, and then the security coming up right behind me as I walk in saying, wait, who are you? And, you know, just so many hurdles to just have your friend come sit in the lobby with you at the hotel, for example. So yeah, those are the frustrating moments where one's Americanness is very clear. But then there's also times when my Americanness comes through, and you know, I call myself a gringa all the time. And in Colombia, gringa and gringo don't just mean white people; they really do mean Americans as well. And my wanting a straight line if I'm standing in line, as opposed to some kind of hodgepodge of a group where people do know who's coming next. Like I remember once in Cuba, we were waiting outside to go to the bank, and there was just basically people sitting around, and we walked up and we were like, how do we know who's next? Everybody knew who was next because they see you when you walk up. What we learn as we watch people is you kind of speak to the person, find out who's right before you, and then you know your place in the line. And I'm like, oh, I am such a gringa. I want us to be standing up in line so I know where I am in it. So there are moments like that.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely think about when I was in the Dominican Republic with Leslie Clark. I mean, I think we went out on 2 occasions. But on both occasions, I was approached by like Italian men that were just like, hey, like, I can get you out of this. And I was like, out of what? You know, but that is very real to see a Black woman and have that association with a sex economy and sex tourism in the Caribbean. That's right. You know,
definitely.
And so, I mean, I was stunned, but also it once again humbled me and made me realize that when we continue to see the certain spaces as a paradise, there's all types of things going on.
Yes, definitely.
Legal, illegal, I mean, all types of things are going on, and people are finding various ways to survive. And I don't think any of them has to be judged, but it's just a truth.
For sure. Is there somebody in the audience who wanted to jump in?
I'm also open to funny stories or.
Right, not ask a question, but reflect on something that Ayanna said.
Derek Grace. Yeah, Derek.
Hello. First of all, was someone else gonna go?
Oh, nope, you're on.
Okay. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And your insight was phenomenal. And something that really hit me is the kind of the delay in realization and light bulb moments. And I remember I had mine in my 20s when I was privileged enough to go to Ghana for a learn and surf trip. That light bulb moment of walking down the street and seeing someone that looked like they could be your cousin, and just not really having that prior to that point, and having that privilege to do that so late in life. My question, I guess I'll pose to you is, how do we close that gap? where, especially with Black travelers, a lot of these moments happen later for a lot of folks, especially folks that identify as Black American. And then when we get exposed to these moments, there's so many questions, and then you're digesting it and like kind of unpacking it, but you've been solidified in this Western way of doing things that it's like, oh my gosh, like if I had understood the diaspora way longer, maybe my self-confidence would have been better growing up. Like maybe my sense of just accomplishment and what I could do would be better. What would you say is a way that we can potentially close that gap from what you've seen?
I love that question. And I feel like there are two parts of it that I want to address. So I'm going to attempt to address part one. And if I'm like, just give me a nudge if I'm not like answering your question fully. Okay, so how can we close the gap? For me, the answer is like resting more. And it's hard because everything that has been programmed within me has taught me to like keep going, right? And I remember that actually I was in, it was October 2019, and I had just come back from a conference in Italy. It was my first time at the Society of History of Technology. I was like on top of the world, but like everything in my life was just like in flux. And I'm so grateful for that also, because if that 2020 pandemic had not hit, I don't know if I would have reorientated myself in the ways that I have been able to today. And that's not to say that the pandemic I really hate, the gratitude and that, no, there's nothing to be grateful for about that period in time. It was horrible. But I think being forced to stop and not move was something that I was not really comfortable with. And I think that my brother tells me I live in the past, okay? He's a totally present, future-oriented person. And I'm always like, but what happened to grandma? Like, and he's in that year, and that's the historian in me. And, but the historian in me is also making me aware that if I'm going to be writing about other people's lives, I need to be really clear about my own. And so to answer your question, I've been digging into my old journals and diaries and just exploring those various chapters of myself. And I was listening to an Issa Rae interview. Issa Rae is like a filmmaker and TV show host. I mean, she's many things, businesswoman, but she said something and she said, damn, I really wish I had that diary from when I was in middle school. And she's like, I would be writing the shit out of shows right now. And I was like, oh, wow, that is brilliant. I need to find my diary from middle school so that I can really understand like these really uncomfortable transition moments in my life. But also, I think that if I make peace with more of those kind of chapters of my childhood, or what someone might call, what I think a therapist, they call it nurturing your inner child, right? And I think that making peace with those like uncomfortable moments, those moments I was grabbed even in New York City, or, those moments where I don't know, I knew that I wasn't safe as a young woman who was 5'10", right? And I was perceived as more mature than my age. And so I also experienced more things that I needed to for my age, right? All of these experiences, I feel like I've been able to make a lot of peace with through reading those old notes. And as someone who loves to be like, delete, 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 like I think we live in that era, right? Like where someone deletes their tweet and then people are like digging and digging and digging. Like, I wish we were using that energy to like dig within our old versions of ourselves rather than like other people's dirt and past, and I think that would allow a lot of us to make peace and allow and explore the world in different ways. And I think to the question, I want to touch quickly on just your mentioning of Ghana. I don't know why, as an undergraduate, I had this idea about Africa and not wanting to be that Black student going to Africa, because that's what I feared my white peers would assume would be my obvious choice, right? And there was intelligence in that and stupidity in that, right? I think that, like, I was clearly concerned about other people's thoughts and opinions of me. I was clearly still thinking about Blackness if I was getting on buses to go into the Andes and find where the Black people lived in Bolivia, you know, and I clearly had all these questions and thoughts about diaspora as I was moving around. But I just, for some reason, that wasn't my immediate choice. And that's something that I've never answered why. But my guess is that part of that is, you know, just embedded in this idea that it's not a tourist space that we even go to, right? Like, even my selection process of Madrid, Spain, was like, well, I knew I was never going to do research and go into the archives, but if I felt like it, I could. I didn't have that same thought process with selecting an African country, right? I wasn't even thinking about the fact that there could even be an archive or a research library to be spending time in. And that's just me being truthful about my own ignorance in that stage of my life. But that's just my truth.
So we have just 1 minute. Thank you so much for that answer. We have just 1 minute before we're going to close. Marie Edmonds, I saw you had unmuted for a minute. Do you want to chime in?
Hi, thank you for pronouncing my first name so well. Yeah, so hi, thank you so much. I guess I could turn on my camera. Well, I don't know if it can, but whatever. So it was fascinating because I'm from Haiti. I moved to New York when I was 9. And just listening to all the stories and like, yes, my God, it's like, it's my story. And, you know, to your point about traveling, you know, younger versus later. So I have 2 older daughters in college and then I have a young son. But my daughter, Sarah, went to China when she was 17 and absolutely fell in love with it, visiting the country and the language. And her minor is Chinese studies. And I'm like thinking like, wow, like I didn't get to travel. I didn't get to do the things. Well, I can't say I didn't. Still young, but early on. But it's just, you know, now I'm like, I'm doing everything for my girls. Like, you are going to travel. You're going to experience the world because, you know, culture is very big in my family. Like, you know, being from Haiti and, you know, at home we speak French. My kids speak French and I speak Creole. So, you know, it's just introducing culture to them is just beautiful. So I'm fascinated by tonight's, you know, conversation. So thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I just want to say,
Patrick
yes.
had something in the chat box. What am I working on now? And if I could share about my personal experience and travels that connect to my current studies, research, interests, outreach, and activism. Okay, I will give a 60-second response to this.
Sure.
Right now, I am trying to finish my dissertation. I'm actually in a potentially not sure what I want to do. Oh my God, I should not have this recorded. My parents will kill me. Like, you don't know what you want to do with your life? I'm thinking about the ways in which history can be applied to many fields, not just universities. And I've been thinking, Marie Edmond, to your point, that culture is really important. And it needs to be preserved. But that doesn't mean that institutions and museums are always responsibly responding to that call. And so I think that seeing myself as a culture worker, it's like a way to continue to think about if I want to enter into an institution or thinking about creating my own space and what that might look like. I believe that Haiti needs like new archives, new images, new sounds. And so part of my dissertation work actually, no, I'm going to be honest. My dissertation work is preserving my father's radio station, which is the one that he had when he was a student, up to no good, just causing chaos. And it's very interesting to find out the young life of my parents, actually. So that's what I'm working on. My place is like filled with cassette tapes and newspaper clippings, and I hope to, write about the collection and hopefully like give those materials to a research library or some kind of space someday. So yeah.
Well, I will just give my thanks to Norvell and Derek for planning, to Ayanna for spending her evening with us, and I'll turn it over to Norvell to close.
So thank you so much, Dr. Pizzillo and Ayanna. Thank you, Derek, for helping with planning this with me along the way. And thank you everyone for joining. Please be sure to check out some of the other events that we have coming up for Black History Month Global Week. And yeah, please have a great night. And we will post this recording on the GLOW website.
Wonderful. I would love a copy, and I want to thank everyone.